I'm ready to slash and burn.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And we have our top 32 bracket. And of course, if I'm going to break this down, then I need to talk to the bot whisperer. So I have Pete Abrahamson on with me today to kind of break all of this down.
Or break it apart, whatever you want me to do. I can trash it too.
Exactly. Whatever we're gonna do, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really a great time to reflect on the season so far, and kind of look ahead to some extent. But you know, when we reflect on the season, before we even talk about the teams that did get into the tournament, there's a couple of teams that I just want to talk to, you know, that didn't get into the tournament, like, you know, and obviously wouldn't have, just because of the interesting seasons. So one of those for me was Glitch, who went 0-4. And, you know, obviously the reason why that's interesting is because I felt so strongly that after what happened last season that I was like, you know, that they're gonna turn it around, like they're gonna come back and have a really strong bot this year, and that just never materialized. And I'm just curious from your view what you think was, you know, like the biggest factor of why that happened.
I think that them going into what would be their sophomore year of BattleBots was I don't know if the freshman year was a fluke more than it was, because one of the things that Matt Maxim of Sewer Snake and Stinger has always said is fights are won in the arena, but tournaments are won in the pits. And if you went to the pit, there was Black Dragon, who was right next to Glitch and busting away, and everybody on the Black Dragon team has a task. They all know what they're supposed to do. This person handles the front wedges. This person handles the flamethrower. Here's the person who deals with the motors and speed controllers. Then you step over into the Glitch, and the robots on the floor, there's like 8 people just around it. And there wasn't a sense of leadership, and there wasn't a sense of people knowing what they should do. And they had like the largest team. There seemed like there was 20 kids there that were all working, but nobody really seemed to be taking charge of how we're going to push through this and how we're going to do this most efficiently. And I don't think they ever got the robot really back up into a level that the 32 requires. You know, they just didn't fight at that thing. They kept being hindered by, I think, some of their own stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like there were a lot of teachable moments for them this season. And, you know, I love that robot. It's a beautiful robot. And I really hope that they can figure it out and actually come in and do what I think that they could do with that robot. I mean, the weapon just has some of the most insane power of any weapon out there. I want to see that materialize in like a consistent season.
And one more note on that too is also people that they fought had paid attention to what happened last year. So how attack angles happened on that robot were much more calculated than they ever were before. And they kind of figured out things that, you know, weapons, Glitch's own weapon is almost their own worst enemy in a certain way. So if I can get it flipped over, or if I get it near the wall, it'll do its own damage for me. So those kind of things were thought about. I mean, many contestants are sort of taking those strategies into account these days.
Yeah, absolutely. The other 0-4 team that I really want to talk about is Kraken. And I think the reason that that story is particularly interesting is, of course, because after years of having a crusher bot they decided to go with this different design and put a vertical spinner on there. Now, I won't say that it didn't make any difference, because there were certainly times where I thought Kraken looked very good, but they still ended up 0-4, and that had to be very difficult for Matt and Sarah after making that decision to have that kind of season.
Correct. Also, I mean, you have to, yes, they're an experienced team, but it was all, I mean, everything in that robot was brand new. Everything about that bot was brand new. So there was so much learning that had to happen. And you have to almost think of this as a freshman year again, right? When they come back next year, they may solve a bunch of things that they were having a lot of issues with, of length of the arm and how it drove and created a lot of bounce and took away the ability to drive because it would wheelie. And there's lots of things about how they may want to start to handle that. And Matt's not a stupid guy. Matt knows how to look at a thing and analyze what's going wrong and attack that problem. So I don't have a fear that Matt won't be on it with a more improved Kraken with lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to see them take what they learned this year and then turn that into something magnificent. And I have no doubt that they'll do everything that they can to do that.
Yeah, I always have complete faith in Matt to pull something off. So even with Kraken, you know, a Crusher bot is a tough way to go fight in BattleBots. Lots of the odds are stacked against you. But he kept pushing. And it wasn't that it was a bad bot. Like, it survived things that other bots should have never made it through. So I know he can make this one a better bot.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, when you look at Kraken, I mean, Kraken is one of the robots that's in the Destructathon, and like, there's a reason for that. It's a very beloved bot, and you know, it deserves to be there. Like, I don't feel it would be right if Kraken wasn't a part of that.
Exactly.
Well, so another thing that I was looking at when I was looking at bots that didn't make the tournament, you know, I was very curious, because you'll always have the folks out there that say this bot should have got in, and
Right.
everything else like that. And I got very meticulous and like academic about this. And so I looked at all of these robots and I was like, you know, is there anything that sets any of them apart from the others? And obviously, you know, some were 0-4, some were 1-3, some were 2-2. But for the most part, most of them had something in common, that any of them that did have wins, those wins only came against other robots that didn't make the tournament, with the exception of two. The two robots that had a win against somebody who did make the tournament were Horizon, who beat Shatter in the Fight Nights, and Gruff, who beat Ripperoni in the Fight Nights. Right. And the really interesting thing for me about that is that when I looked at strength of schedule, Gruff had a really difficult strength of schedule. They beat Ripperoni and they lost to Quantum, Witch Doctor, and Malice, who were all pretty good ranked bots. And so that was probably the one discrepancy for me, that when I was comparing them to, say, Shatter, who lost to Horizon, who was, you know, isn't even in the tournament, right. You know, that was the one where I was like, I really feel like Gruff should have been in and not Shatter, based on the strength of schedule and having the same record. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that, because that was the one where I'm like, I don't know, if I was Gruff, I would feel a little bit left out.
Yeah, I mean, it gets, when we're at that sort of point, there's a very difficult like decisions that are being made in that back trailer about what the hell are we going to do with this. Like, we have these two bots or these four bots, who are we going to put through? How do we justify that decision? You know, Gruff's a damn tough robot, and we know it would have been able to survive, because they can definitely do the pit work. That wasn't really one of the problems. I think we kind of just probably needed a hammer, was more likely, was what we really wanted in there. So that I don't remember what the decision was for that lower, you know, where did they come in, into 32 or 31? I don't
Shatter
remember what
ended
the
up at 31.
31. Okay.
Yeah.
And who ended up at 32?
Fusion.
Fusion. Right. Okay. You know, it was probably 4 or 5 of us all sitting in a room at 1 a.m. in the morning going, you know, and somebody saying, what if we do this because of this? Fine, go with that. I can't make another decision anymore. So, you know, it's tough. I feel sorry for Sam because Gruff is a durable bot and could definitely make its way through the bracket. But also so can Shatter. You know, Shatter is a pretty amazing robot to watch. So
yeah, absolutely. No shade to Bots FC. You know, that
right.
was just something when I'm looking at the two schedules, I'm like, you know, Gruff dealt with some pretty tough people this season. But I mean, you know, hey, like they have given Riptide a run for their money? It's tough to say. You know, durable bot versus a bot that likes to break people's faces. You know,
Right.
it could have been interesting.
Right. A brick versus a pair of scissors. So yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, that's what I was looking at in terms of those that didn't make the tournament, but let's talk about those who did. And I really want to start in the quadrant with Hydra as the number 4 seed. So
Okay.
Hydra 3-1. Their only loss was to Tantrum, and I swear, like, it just needs to be planned that like every few matches or so Jake fights Tantrum, because then he gets like upset and then he just takes it all out on everyone else. That's just what needs to happen. Yeah, I mean, I you know, I definitely, the number 4 seed I thought was valid. I mean, sure, there's a couple of teams that are 4-0, but again, you look at strength of schedule, and like Hydra just absolutely eviscerated everyone but Tantrum.
And his only loss is to last year's champion. So that kind of puts you pretty high up in the rank. You know, to be able to justify him as 4 is pretty easy in my mind.
Yes,
And
yes.
he did great. Like, it was fun to watch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he set a flip record that I'm not sure is ever going to be broken unless by him. So
Less by him, exactly.
We'll see. I'm gonna put the challenge to all the flippers out there. Break that record.
Right.
You know, he's gonna have Death Roll, which could be kind of interesting. I think that, like, you know, the problem for Death Roll is if they can't find a way to pop Hydra up, get underneath, get to the sides, they're going to be in trouble. I mean, you know, really
Right.
what Death Roll has is that weapon, and if they can't get to the spaces they need to use that weapon, they're going to get flipped a whole lot.
I mean, Death Roll, what's really great is the shape that they built Death Roll in is like rolling a die, right? It just lands on the ground as a little cube and then pops back up onto its wheels and then goes. It just really worked out well with that sort of design. And it'll be great to watch it getting flipped by Hydra, because you know that's probably going to happen unless they can get a side hit. You know, that's the key, is they have to get around to Jake's side. He never gives you your side. He always is constantly keeping that nose pointed right at the other bot.
Yep, I think really the only chance that Death Roll might have is if they happen to catch Hydra in like a mid-flip attempt and they can get in there while the flipper's up. You know, that might be a way to do something, but we'll see.
Does that, you know, and also Death Roll doesn't really play any ground game.
No.
You know, so that is to Jake's benefit in a way, not having to deal with forks or wedges or piano keys or any of the other stuff. You know, he just has to make sure he gets structural elements of the robot that he's lifting and not the weapon. So
yes, absolutely. So then we have the 13 and 20 matchup, which is Beta and Whiplash. And Beta, you know, 3-1, and their last match versus Bloodsport was just phenomenal. I mean, like the driving, and it was just a great match. And then Whiplash, who it's kind of a tale of 2 seasons, you know, started out very rough for them uncharacteristically, and then came back with, you know, and finished the season 2-2 and kind of snuck into the tournament. That could be really interesting. I mean, like, Matt is a great driver. John Reed is obviously a good driver. If Beta wedges up that could make it very difficult for Whiplash.
Right.
So could be interesting.
Yeah, does Beta go with the single AR hammer, or does he go with the big mallets that have the little bodkin on the end? Like what weapon is he going to choose to fight a robot like Whiplash? Because Whiplash doesn't lead with their spinner, they lead with the lifter. So John's going to have to play a game that kind of keeps the lifter at bay, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, Matt this season played with a lot of problems. Like the rebuilds in the pits were long and strenuous and difficult, and it did not flow as it has before for them. This was a tough season, especially in the pits.
Yes, absolutely. Then we have Quantum at number 5, who was obviously 4-0, versus 28 seed Ribot, who was 1-3 and barely got in with that win over Scorpios, which was a phenomenal win.
Right.
But very rough season for them. Obviously, very good strength of schedule. And then you have Quantum, who I think broke like this idea that Crusher bots could not go 4-0. I mean, they've just looked amazing this season.
The driving on Quantum is amazing. Like what they've been doing, what Grant and James have been able to do with that robot is really impressive. I got to do an interview with them. I don't know if you saw that we put on YouTube. They're really fun to talk to and super smart, and like you can see why Quantum choosing to be a Crusher can win because of some of the things they've designed into it. So
yes, and I'm also going to add that I think at after the last match, Chris and Kenny said something like, nobody thought that Quantum was going to be in this position, and I just want to say I did before the season ever started. Because I love that robot. I believe in it so much. And I think that as a Crusher, it just has this level of power and speed that I don't see from other Crusher bots. So I absolutely believe that they could do it. And I'm so pleased that they were able to. So, Ripot has some momentum to carry over from that last match, but it'll be really interesting to see if they can stay out of the jaws of Quantum, or if Quantum is going to be having frog legs for dinner.
And Ribot also had I know they had some pit issues. They were having some repair stuff that definitely, I think there was a fire early on for them that really messed a lot of stuff up that took quite a bit of repair for them. Yes. So it hasn't been the best, when you come out of that state and you're in that oh my God, we've just put it together, we just repaired, we're going to go run into the arena. Your confidence isn't that high. You're sort of shaky. So it's tough. So that's why they may have come up with some of those losses rather than being as calculated as sometimes David can be, because he is very, he gets right up there and very tight and really pays attention to what the other drivers are doing. He thinks it through. He plays chess out there.
Yes, absolutely. So then we have the number 12 seed Ripperoni at 3-1 versus the 21 seed Black Dragon at 2-2. I am really, really excited for this match. I love both teams. Their robots are both so powerful, and I think this is going to be a really good one.
Ripperoni is definitely my favorite bot of this season, of new bots coming in. They blew me away. I love Fred anyways, but the way the team's dynamic is with Austin, Anna leading that team is so great. She on camera is amazing. Her ability to talk about the bot and talk about robots themselves, she should have my job. So
she's very smart, so smart.
I love her. I was so impressed with this robot and how they went about doing it and the choices they made. Technical. There is a video that I did with them in the interview, and we go in depth, and it should be coming up in the next, I don't know exactly when we'll post it, but it was so great to sort of dive in really deep into the making of a motor from scratch and all of the things they kind of went through to sort of solve problems.
Yes, yes, absolutely. They will be a team to watch in the tournament
Yes.
for sure. So moving over to the Witch Doctor section of the bracket, Witch Doctor obviously just fought Minotaur, ended the season at 3-1 with that loss, and they will be fighting the number 30 seed Jackpot, sitting at 2-2. I mean, you know, Jackpot obviously, like, they've been a really good robot in the past. I think it's an interesting matchup versus Witch Doctor. Witch Doctor has had a really great season, although, you know, noting that they did almost lose to Fusion. So
Right.
anything could happen. But yeah, I think that'll be an interesting one.
One of the things that they kind of got a lot of gremlins out of the bot in this season, I felt like, and you could really see Mike's ability to drive in this season. It came off really well. They fought against, oh God, I'm forgetting which robot, but I can see what happened to Witch Doctor, but I can't remember the bot that happened on the other side. He lost a piece of front armor on one side and then proceeded to do something I saw Matt do with Whiplash years ago against Son of Waiachi, which was same thing, lost a piece of armor and then justified the robot to the other side, like led with the side with the armor. And it just shows quality of driving. Like that was, I mean, Mike just really showed why he is such a good driver, and people talk about him as one of the great drivers.
Yes, 100%. So just below them, we have the number 14 seed Lockjaw, which was 3-1, versus 19 seed Bloodsport, which was 2-2. And what a comeback season for Donald Hudson. Like,
yes,
after going 0-4 last season, I mean, the bot has looked so much better. And then Bloodsport had, I think a couple, like the rotator match was just so good.
yes,
But they had a couple of tough ones as well. So that
yeah.
could be, yeah.
They lost their head on one of them. Basically, they got really wow. It was pretty bad.
Yes.
But they, I love Bloodsport. Justin's a great person to talk to, and he's really done some good job inside that bot. A lot of the technology they've done, and a lot of things they've sort of thought through very carefully to sort of make Bloodsport such a powerful horizontal spinner. And then Donald, who's actually most of the time, not every match, but he's kept the magic smoke in his robot this time. So he's solved some of those problems of just catching fire right in the middle of the match every time. And that usually be the thing that ends his match for him. But he's done well. It was great to watch him fight as well as he did.
Yes, definitely. So then you have Huge, which was 4-0, sitting at number 6, versus Scorpios, 2-2, sitting at number 27. Very different seasons for both of these bots. I mean,
Yes.
You have Huge that had just a phenomenal season. I mean, like, you can tell Jonathan smiling from ear to ear how excited he is about how the season's gone. And then Scorpios, it's been very up and down. They definitely had some rough matches. I think it seemed like they were pretty down after that last match versus Ribot, which is understandable. And then of course they had the loss to Scorpios, or no, the loss to Sawblaze.
Those Sawblaze, yeah.
Which, I mean, I am still a fan of, I would have absolutely used the overkill blade. There's nothing that anyone could have said that would have convinced me not to do it. But I mean, I know that's tough because then people are going to judge that and say, should they have done that or not?
I stand behind Zach's choices to make that, they made a choice to go with the blade because, I mean, in essence, they kind of felt that Sawblaze is just gotten to a point that it's a better sawbot, right? It was a better hammer bot like that, hammer saw like that than Scorpios. So how were they going to attack they needed something different, is the way they felt. And I think it's a totally justifiable thing. And we don't get that many chances to experiment. So you've got to go out and try something and see if it's going to work. So I completely agree. Yes, it ended in a loss, but you know, I would I would just give the finger to all those people on the internet that say you should have done that. It's like, you go build a damn robot and come here and fight. And you tell me how many chances you get to make some experiment against somebody like Jameson, who is so good. You know, Sawblaze is just beautiful this year. So, you know, I think Zach and Diana are totally justified in making that decision. And I stand behind them, because they asked me and I was like, I like the idea. And this is why. And I just, like I said, you just don't know. You could possibly have hit the belts or the chain with that arm because it's got such reach.
Yeah, that's very possible. What's your take on Huge this season?
Oh my God, Huge. They, with that S-Blar that they've been using, the blade has really, like, Huge is doing everything that Jonathan told us years ago and said, this is what Huge is going to be able to do, and then had some rocky moments and just wasn't able to get Huge to do it. Like, Huge works, right? Huge is finally in a position where they're not building it in the morning of. They don't show up in Vegas with a box of parts. They actually show up with a robot this time. And it's doing great. Like, it's just so fun to watch it actually do what he intended it to do. And I think this is a great match because actually having something like Scorpios could possibly reach in and get to Huge's belts. You know, that is their weakest spot, is in the dead center. So if somebody can reach there, that's the way to do it.
Yes, we will see. Huge looks pretty unstoppable. So
no, it's great. It's super fun to watch. And Jonathan has just got, he's smiling from ear to ear in every interview. So it's really fun to see.
Yes. So the last matchup in that bracket is number 11 Claw Viper at 3-1 versus 22 Mad Catter at 2-2. Claw Viper was just insane for the first 3 matches, and I was loving it. As someone who really loves control bots and wants to see one win the giant nut,
I'm right there with you.
Loving it so much. And you know, Mad Catter has, you know, they've had moments of brilliance this season, and then they've had like not so good moments. So it's kind of, you know, a split season. But you know, Calvin is such a good driver that you never know.
Yes. He can pull himself out of lots of bad situations and sort of seem to get back in there and make contact the way he needs to. But going back to Quad Viper, you know, I said, yes, Ripperoni is the new of the new bots. It was my favorite bot. I was just, you know, a huge flag waving fan for Quad Viper. Like, how much can I cheer? You know, it was so enjoyable to blink and then go, oh my God, it's on the other side of the arena already. It was so fast, and so it just made the matches so energetic to witness the slam bots across the arena and back and forth. Ugh, what a treat. Kevin is, I'm so happy for him and for that robot and the things that they've changed to make it such a better bot.
Absolutely. And I've said this before too. I was like, Kevin just needs to come on my show, because it's just going to be like 30 minutes of me telling him how amazing his robot is. So that seems like a pretty easy interview to me. But
I love it.
Yeah,
That would be fun.
Yeah. So then the next quadrant is the Riptide quadrant, with Riptide sitting at the number 2 seed at 4-0.
Right.
Now, I am a person that can say I can separate the fact that I am not a fan of some of the antics of the team, but they're 4-0. They've had 4 knockouts. I don't really know how you can argue with that.
You can't. I mean, the bot has done unbelievably well. Aside from, you know, the way the internet has seen them, and from how, you know, how they come off on camera, you know, that shouldn't be shade upon the robot and why it got to where it did. And it got to where it did is because Ethan knows how to drive. Like, Ethan's a pretty damn good driver and aggressive, and he just doesn't let up. And that's part of the reason why Riptide's where it is. They've got a seriously powerful weapon, and they get right up there in the other bot's business.
Yes.
And they don't stop. So.
That is very true. Now they're going against Shatter, who has that really amazing hammer on there. You know, will they be able to make any impact with that hammer? You know, that's going to be a really interesting one, because I think, you know, like you said, Ethan is an in-your-face driver, and he's definitely going to be in their face.
Yeah, I mean, he will never let Adam have the moment, because Adam needs moments to be lined up and then swing. And it's tough because he has to pinpoint, he has to be at a certain distance so that he knows he gets the hammer in the thing. And he obviously does not want to drop the hammer. Well, just like John Reed does, he doesn't want to drop it into the mass of a spinning object. So it is much harder on Adam to be able to win this, to be able to get around. So
yes, for sure.
It's going to be a tough fight.
Yes.
But he does have a lot of plastic on the outside of Shatter to take and absorb quite a bit of impact. So that will be, you know, that's what Ethan has to get through first.
Yes, definitely. So then you have the number 15 seed Lucky at 3-1 versus Hypershock, the number 18 seed at 2-2. Lucky obviously has had a really great season.
Yes.
I mean, I cannot say enough about Matt Olson as a driver. He is just phenomenal. And, you know, it's just unfortunate that they had to have that last match versus Cobalt and get absolutely obliterated. But, you know, that I think that'll be interesting. Like, you know, Hypershock, like Will Bales is a crazy driver, and who knows what's going to happen.
Yes. Yeah, Will, and Hypershock's weapon is no joke. You know, it can do similar things that Cobalt just did. So Lucky has to be careful. If they get around on Lucky and they catch edges, or they get under Lucky, it's going to be a problem. Yes. But Lucky can get them inverted and send them around the arena, which, you know, Hypershock wasn't this season, it was last season, lost a fight because they spent almost half the thing upside down, and so they weren't very effectual with their weapon. And then they eventually got it self-righted again and did a bunch of damage, but it wasn't enough to take out the balance of the fact that they had been inverted for so long and really not doing anything. So that could be Lucky's chance, is if they keep them upside down and never let Hypershock have the distance to do the pop back over, because they do need a little bit of space to back up and wheelie and then flip over.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that one should be interesting. One that's definitely going to be interesting is Endgame versus Tantrum.
Yes.
The battle of the, you know, two
champions,
former champions, number 7 and number 26. Very polar opposite seasons, with Endgame at 3-1 and Tantrum at 1-3. You know, Tantrum, I mean, they've had a very strong schedule, which as a champion you would expect that they would. And they do have that win versus Hydra, and then of course Endgame has the one loss versus Ripperoni. So could be really interesting.
I think it's going to be great, because they approach the ground game very differently. Endgame is all about how many salad forks can you possibly have? Like, do we have all of them? Do I have the shrimp fork? Do I have the crab fork? Do I have the dessert fork? Let's go. Where, you know, Tantrum has a much smaller set of forks, but really their magnets and how they stick to the arena floor is more important. And if they can get themselves under at all Endgame, they're going to try to pop a hole into the bottom of Endgame.
Yes, they will certainly try. We will see if they are successful. And so
Jack is no slouch when it comes to driving either. So
no, he is not. Unless he gets stuck in the forks, but they're not going to make that mistake ever again. Or in the kill saws, yeah, they're not going to do that again. And then we had Copperhead, the number 10 seed at 3-1, versus Rotator, the number 23 seed at 2-2. Copperhead has, personally,
unbelievable season.
I think that they could very easily rival Riptide for most destructive. They absolutely blew the back out of Triton. Like they've done some damage this season. And then you have Rotator, where Victor's definitely had his struggles. It's impressive how he's been able to pull it together and come back from like some of those early struggles and get something going. Definitely not the season he wanted, though.
Yeah, he was having issues with, I believe he was having weapon issues, and one drive, it's a 2-motor drive system that drives the weapon, and he was only getting one to go. And that was sort of a big problem. And I don't remember when he solved that or if he ever did. But he got it to work enough to be able to go out there and fight. But he wasn't, I don't feel that Rotator in those fight card fights was ever really at its full Rotator best. Like, I know Victor can deliver far harder punches than he's been delivering.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a tough one against Copperhead.
Yes.
Like Copperhead may have been bested in their final match, but like that, I have full belief that they are going to really make an impact in the tournament.
Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, they're just that brick with a nasty little weapon attached to it. It's so powerful. In the way it's done. I mean, it's the smallest bot we have in the field, just the most dense and compressed neutron star of a bot. It's, I think that Copperhead is destined for greatness. Like, Copperhead has just been, I loved watching them fight. So
yes, absolutely. And then we have the final quadrant with the number 1 seed Minotaur at 4-0 versus number 32 Fusion at 1-3. And like, obviously, to me, the whole season, especially after that first fight versus Tantrum, I'm like, if Minotaur goes undefeated this season, I feel very strongly that they will be the number 1 seed in the tournament. And they've just looked so good.
Yes.
Really impressive.
Yeah, Daniel's driving and that bot has been solid. They just have not really had many issues at all, and they've just gone out there. And that one fight against Cobalt, though, that was an amazing like flip of a coin. Like, it was going one way, and then boom, it went the other, and that was super impressive. That would have been their closest thing to what I think they could have come away with a big loss, would have been that one.
Yes. And they're fighting Fusion, who has had an interesting season, because especially during the earlier part of the season, I was like, wow, like, Reese actually has a bot here,
Yeah.
They almost pulled it off against Witch Doctor, and then it just, kind of fell apart for him a little bit.
I think Reese, they have a good bot there. They've done the fact that they have a small vertical and a horizontal combined is a really cool concept. And I would love to keep seeing it coming back and getting better and better, because it's really it just makes it more difficult for their opponents to choose how they're going to face such thing, because everybody's got their vertical configuration. Everybody has their tombstone configuration. Everybody has, they've all got these different ways of, but when it can just spin around on you and all of a sudden present you with a completely different weapon than you're prepped for, I love Fusion.
Yes, and Reese definitely has one of the most colorful personalities.
He's so exuberant and big.
I just love it. I think they could do Reese interviews all day, and I would be entertained.
I know, Reese is hysterical. Reese is very funny. He does make me laugh a lot.
Yes. So you have the number 16 seed Switchback, number 17 Malice, both at 3-1. And I really feel that both bots have been much more impressive this season. I mean, Switchback, this is their second season. They made some improvements. They look so much better. And then Malice, like, really so happy for Bunny, because I think, Malice gets a lot of flack, and I don't really feel that it's warranted. I think that
It
it
isn't.
has so much, potential and strength and everything. And I'm really happy to see them both have such a solid season.
If I'm not mistaken, and I surely could be because I've watched too many fights, I thought they maintained just fighting with drumstick the whole time. If I'm not mistaken, and that might have been a thing, is the fact that they stayed with one weapon shape and allowed them to sort of be more comfortable with what to do with that one weapon.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you that for sure myself, but I mean,
somebody on the internet will.
Somebody on the internet will, yeah.
I will be wrong, I'm sure. Somebody on the internet's going to dive in and go, no.
Yeah. But no, I mean, like, I think that should be a pretty interesting matchup. I mean, I think that they're fairly well, evenly matched, and I'll be
curious. I think it's a perfect balance right there. It's a really good, perfect in the middle ranking and middle bots. Like, it'll be great.
Yes, exactly. And then we have Sawblaze at the number 8 seed at 3-1, and Blip 25 at 2-2. And so, obviously, like, JMO had some tough times versus Hydra, but one thing that we all know about JMO is that he learns so much from every match that he fights. And I have to feel like he learned a lot from that Hydra match. And
Yes.
So he's going to come with a plan against Blip.
Totally. He really does think it through. He spends a lot of time thinking of the strategy, but the pit team and the care of the bot that they do allows Jameson to go into that arena with the best bot possible, and a bot that he has no worries that something's going wrong. No, like, oh, is that keyway going to shear? Or, there's none of these questions for him. He goes in with, this is the best bot I've got, and I'm going to be able to do this. And that's a huge part of winning, is having the confidence in that robot to do exactly what you ask it to do. It's the same thing that when I always used to talk about Matt Vasquez as one of the best drivers, it's because Whiplash, other than this season, has always been in that state for him. And he never had a question that the bot was going to do something that he didn't expect it to do. So he could just drive it right up to its edge.
Yes.
Same with Jameson.
Yeah.
Go JMO.
I know, trust me, huge Sawblaze fan here. So yeah, that
I mean, I may be wearing a Seems Reasonable t-shirt right now, but I'm also a huge fan of Jameson. It gets so difficult for me sometimes because I love all my bot builders. Like, they are great people and really good friends, and it's hard to I can't cheer for one over another. Like, most devastating one for me was Hypershock versus Whiplash. Was like watching my two sons fight each other with swords. Like, this is awful.
Yeah, no. After having done these interviews for a year now, I'm starting to get to that point where it's hard for me to pick one or the other, because there's just so many great people. So it's tough to choose. And so then the last match in that quadrant, number 9 Cobalt at 3-1, and number 24 Monsoon at 2-2, which this is an interesting one for me, because I've said this again. I mean, maybe it's just my love of Monsoon, but this bot was so close to going 4-0 this season. Yes. So close. And they both have really powerful destructive weapons. I mean, Cobalt, I think, obviously is a little bit more high profile, especially because of the Ghost Raptor match. But Monsoon put so many holes in Horizon. Yes. So, like, they're both very destructive, and I'm very excited to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, and both British bots, and it's great. Like, I love this whole aspect of this one, and doing similar things. They're, the way their bots are designed, but Monsoon has the ability to sort of wheelie and get itself out and flip over, and Cobalt always sort of stays stuck to the ground. So there's this whole other dynamic that's going to go on other than just two big spinning discs. It'll be a fun one. It'll be a very fun one.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to it, especially because, when you only go for the last couple of days of filming, there's so much that you miss, and even so much that you forget sometimes. So all of this is, fairly new to me at this point, which is kind of exciting. But yeah, we'll see how these matches played out. And then actually one more team that I kind of wanted to pick your brain on, a team that wasn't even in this grouping, because we've had these exhibition matches, which I think are great.
Let me stop you.
Yes.
Terratops, right?
Yeah, of course I've got to talk about Terratops. Yeah, because like BattleBots is doing all of this stuff, like with the proving grounds and everything, and I think it's great because it gives these teams a chance to show their mettle and see what they can do. And I think Terratops was a robot that a lot of people before the season, just seeing the design, didn't think was going to work. I saw a lot of negative comments about it, and I love it. I mean, because I love the theming of it and everything. Right. And I thought, it's like a blend of Witch Doctor and Whiplash. And I think that's amazing. And when, they came out, they've done so good and they've looked so good. I am really, really excited for this robot.
So am I. I've known their dad for a while. He's been a huge fan and comes to all the things, and he's brought them as younger things to the thing, and I've given tours of the pits, and they're like, they've been doing Vex and lots of other stuff. Like, it's not like this is their first sort of foray into robots. So I was very vocal about making sure that we chose them as one of the new bots. Like, I think that this was going to be a great bot to sort of bring into the fold. And I think they showed that they've definitely got what it takes. And then especially, I mean, if we tap into robo games, they did great up there. So, I'm really happy for Terratops. And I love the idea of having the spinner with the lifter over it, that they can have something lifted and then drop it down onto the spinner. I mean, it's such a cool concept to me. It was like, that's a great way to sort of think around it,
Yes, and I think that the fans really responded to it. I mean, that's part of the battle. Like, you can't just have a good robot. BattleBots, really is a show, and it's important that the fans kind of latch on to these teams and these robots to an extent. And I mean, I really think the fans just went crazy for Terratops when I was there. So I think that really shows that this robot has a place in BattleBots in the future.
Totally. I mean, they had on that day that was their first fight, they had a rocky start because they had a switch fail. And so they got into the arena and it didn't start up. We had to move their fight, brought in another one. I mean, television never sees any of this, right? But the live part of it was like, oh, fuck, we're all freaking out like, oh God, we got to get this bot up and running. And they come back in, and I think it happened again. And it was like, everybody was freaked out. Like, we brought in this new bot. Is it going to work? And then they went and had their first fight. And it was just amazing. So I'm so proud of them and so happy that they're part of the family and doing what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And one last thing that I wanted to ask you about, that's not necessarily having to do with any of the teams, but this year, obviously, BattleBots has done a lot of changes with the rules and things like that. And one that I expected to have maybe more of an impact, but hasn't as much, has been the challenges. Now, the challenges have certainly made a difference for Malice because they had a successful challenge.
Right.
But, a lot of the other ones just didn't end up getting overturned. Do you still feel that this is, a value-added thing in the rare case that there is an overturned, decision?
Totally. I believe it gives the builders this option because, when you're there at the box, you have one perspective. The judges sit at a certain side, they have another perspective. And this was a great way to sort of it takes out the sting of sort of what might end up of a loss on the internet, or, being seen is like, well, you know what? We went back and we looked at it, and guess what? The win is actually the way it was. Or, wow, we did not, because of like Malice is a perfect example. The judges don't watch the television monitor. They're watching the fight. They're looking at it live. So they see just this one picture. Malice, their butt was away from, so like Lisa's over here looking and Malice is turned this way. So they can't see that the weapon up front is spinning because it was completely blocked by the robot from their point of view. So to them, it was still like they thought it was down until they went and then looked. And now they're watching a monitor and they have multiple camera angles and goes, oh my God, the weapon was still working. Of course, like, boom, that is not a point in damage. That is, they will not suffer for that. So that, I thought it was great. It works in football. It should work in BattleBots. I think is one of the best additions.
Yes, for sure. I think overwhelmingly most of the rule changes and just other changes like knowing the matches ahead of time. I think all of that has been very valuable. And it just, it shows that when these things come up as they did last year, like a lot of the things that influence some of these changes, BattleBots listened and made these changes. And I think that they've been working well.
We had many meetings over rules. And, we have Adam Wrigley is sort of the representative who's there from the builders. And he goes back and talks, and like we share the whole thing and we talk it through to sort of say, does this work? We need to make it work so that the rules actually mean something. And we spend a lot of time trying to go through that and solve those problems. And I think the challenge was a perfect example of that. And, it worked quite well with Malice. Like that was the right way to use it. So.
Yep, absolutely. And who knows, the season is not over, so we may see more of those happen. It's always possible. But yeah, well, I can say that, so far, I think that season World Championship VII has been one of the best yet. Lots of really entertaining matches. And I think, so much, what I like to say is fan service, like matches that I think fans really wanted to see.
Right.
So, hey, like, I think that that's great. And I think it's going to be an amazing tournament.
It certainly is. As somebody who's witnessed it, I can tell you it is an amazing tournament. And that's all I can say about that.
Yes, exactly. We can say no more. But yeah, so got 4 weeks of tournament, lots of good stuff to come. I hope everybody keeps watching. I'm sure that everybody will. And please keep watching this show and
Yes.
make sure that you like, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. As I try and push my subscriber count up a little bit so that I can do some more really cool things on the show. So yeah, just do it.
Well, you may get at least one more now that I'm on the show, but you got to get somebody like, you got to get Will or Matt or Jonathan, and then you'll get a real spike. But me, I might get you one extra.
We'll see. If you love the Bot Whisper, subscribe right now.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, but everybody keep watching, and we'll see everyone next time on the show.